Bread was the foundation of a medieval peasant-esque life. Morning, noon, and night. It appeared on the table in some form dark loaves made from rye or barley. Thick porridge simmered slowly over a fire, and even weak ale brewed from grains. By modern standards, this sounds like a guaranteed recipe for diabetes. Today we are told that carbohydrates spike blood sugar, that bread is dangerous, and that grains should be avoided. Yet for medieval peasants, diabetes was so rare that it barely existed as a recognized disease. The contradiction forces an uncomfortable question. How could a population living on carbs remain metabolically healthy? The first answer lies in the nature of the bread itself. Medieval bread was nothing like the soft, white loaves lining modern supermarket shelves. It was made from whole grains ground with stone mills, which preserved the bran, germ, and fiber. This bread was dense, heavy, and slow to digest. Fiber slowed the release of glucose into the bloodstream, preventing the sharp blood sugar spikes that overwhelm the body's insulin response. What modern bodies experience as a sugar rush simply didn't happen in the same way. The bread fed them gradually, over hours, rather than flooding their system all at once. Then there is the issue of refinement, or rather, the lack of it. Refined flour did exist, but it was a luxury reserved for nobles and monasteries. White bread was a symbol of wealth, not our daily staple. Peasants ate what was available and affordable, which meant rough grains often mixed with legumes, seeds, or even ground vegetables during hard times. Ironically, poverty protected their health. Without industrial processing, their food retained nutrients that modern refining strips away, including magnesium and chromium minerals now known to play a role in blood sugar control. Sugar, the true villain in modern metabolic disease, was nearly absent from a peasant-esque diet. Honey existed, but it was expensive and used sparingly. There were no desserts, no sweetened drinks, no hidden sugars in sauces or bread. Sweetness was rare enough to feel special, not addictive. Compare that to today, where sugar is silently added to nearly everything, training the body to expect constant glucose surges. Medieval peasants didn't have to resist sugar. It simply wasn't there. Even ale, often blamed as an unhealthy habit, tells a different story in medieval life. Ale was weak, thick, and often consumed because clean water was hard to find. It contained calories and small amounts of nutrients, but very little alcohol by modern standards. More importantly, it was fermented. Fermentation breaks down carbohydrates and can improve insulin response, something modern science is only beginning to fully appreciate. What looks like reckless drinking through a modern lens was actually a practical, metabolically neutral choice. Portion size also mattered. Medieval meals were filling but simple. There was no endless variety to stimulate overeating. When food lacks hyper-palatable combinations of sugar, fat, and salt, the body naturally regulates intake. Peasants stopped eating when they were full, not when the plate was empty or the package was finished. Hunger and satiety signals remained intact, unconfused by engineered flavors designed to override them. Seasonality further shaped their diet. Food availability changed throughout the year. Fresh vegetables in summer, preserved grains in winter, occasional meat during festivals. This natural variation prevented the body from being locked into a constant metabolic state. Periods of abundance were followed by scarcity, giving the pancreas regular breaks from insulin production. Today's constant abundance leaves no such rest. Perhaps the most striking difference is that medieval peasants did not eat to entertain themselves. Food was fuel, not therapy. Meals were social, practical, and limited by daylight and labor. There was no emotional snacking, no eating out of boredom, and no late-night sugar binges under artificial light. Their relationship with food was grounded in necessity, not pleasure-seeking. When viewed through a modern lens, the medieval peasant diet looks harsh and limited. But metabolically, it was protective. The carbs were real food, not chemical shortcuts. The sugar was rare. The meals were finite. What saved medieval peasants from diabetes was not what they avoided intentionally, but what had not yet been invented. For a medieval peasant, movement was not an option or a lifestyle choice, it was the price of survival. From the moment the sun rose to the moment it disappeared, the body was in motion. Fields had to be plowed by hand, water carried from wells, firewood chopped, animals tended, tools repaired, and homes maintained. Every task required physical effort, and that effort was spread across the entire day. This constant, low-intensity movement created a metabolic environment that modern humans almost never experience. Unlike modern exercise routines, which compress activity into short bursts at the gym, medieval labor was steady and prolonged. Muscles were engaged for hours, not minutes, walking miles behind a plow, bending to plant seeds, lifting sacks of grain, and repairing fences all demanded energy but rarely pushed the body into exhaustion. This kind of work kept blood sugar levels stable because muscles were always hungry for glucose. Instead of sugar lingering in the bloodstream, it was immediately pulled into working muscle tissue and burned for fuel. This continuous demand for energy made medieval bodies extremely sensitive to insulin. Insulin wasn't fighting against inactivity or excess calories. It was doing its job efficiently. Every meal was followed by hours of movement, not sitting. The glucose from bread or porridge had somewhere to go. In contrast, the modern pattern eating a carbohydrate-heavy meal and then sitting for hours creates a bottleneck where glucose has nowhere to be used, forcing insulin levels to rise again and again. Over time, this leads to resistance. Medieval peasants never gave their bodies that chance. Rest also looked very different. When peasants rested, they truly rested. There were no glowing screens keeping them awake late into the night. No artificial light disrupting circadian rhythms. Sleep followed the sun. In winter, nights were long, and sleep was deep. Proper sleep is now known to be critical for insulin regulation. But medieval peasants followed this rhythm naturally. Their hormones rose and fell with daylight, not notifications. Even the concept of stress was different. Life was hard, but stress was physical rather than psychological. The body is well equipped to handle physical stress. Lifting, walking, cold, heat. What it struggles with is chronic mental stress paired with physical inactivity. Modern stress keeps cortisol levels elevated while the body remains still. In medieval life, stress hormones were released during labor and burned off through movement. There was a natural reset built into the day. Another overlooked factor is posture and muscle engagement. Medieval work demanded full body coordination. Squatting, lifting, carrying, pushing, and pulling all activated large muscle groups. These muscles act as massive glucose sinks, improving blood sugar control. Today, many people sit for 10 or more hours a day, effectively turning off these metabolic engines. Even an hour at the gym cannot fully counteract a day spent sitting. Peasants never faced this imbalance. There was also no separation between exercise and life. Movement wasn't something done for health. It was life itself, because it was unavoidable. It was consistent. Consistency matters more for metabolic health than intensity. Modern people often exercise intensely for short periods and then remain sedentary the rest of the day. Medieval peasants moved at a moderate pace almost constantly, which is far more effective for preventing insulin resistance. Fasting and movement often overlapped as well. Many peasants began work before eating and continued laboring for hours before their first meal. Physical activity in a fasted state further increased insulin sensitivity and trained the body to switch efficiently between fuel sources. This wasn't a health strategy, it was simply how life worked. But the metabolic benefits were profound. By nightfall, the body was tired in a way modern bodies rarely are. Muscles had been used, energy stores depleted, and hunger felt honestly earned. When food was finally consumed, it replenished rather than overwhelmed. This daily cycle of movement, rest, and recovery kept the metabolic system flexible and resilient. Medieval peasants did not avoid diabetes because they understood metabolism. They avoided it because their bodies were never allowed to forget their purpose. Movement was constant, natural, and unavoidable. In that world, blood sugar had a job to do. In ours, it often has nowhere to go. To understand why medieval peasants were largely free from diabetes, you have to understand just how rare sugar truly was in their world. Today, sugar surrounds us so completely that we barely notice it. It hides in bread, sauces, drinks, and foods marketed as healthy. In medieval times, sweetness was not a daily expectation, it was an exception. For peasants, sugar was not a habit, not a craving, and certainly not an addiction. It was a luxury almost no one could afford. Cane sugar existed in the medieval world, but it arrived through long trade routes from the Middle East and later from Mediterranean plantations. By the time it reached European markets, it was incredibly expensive. It was sold by apothecaries as a medicine, not as food. Only nobles, royalty, and the very wealthy could afford to use sugar regularly. And even then it was treated as something special. A peasant might go years without tasting refined sugar at all. The body simply never learned to expect it. Honey was more common, but still limited. Beekeeping required resources, land, and skill, and honey was often reserved for religious offerings, mead, or special occasions. It was used carefully, not poured into daily meals. There were no sweet breakfasts, no desserts after dinner, no sugar-laden snacks between meals. Sweetness was rare enough that it didn't dominate the palate or override natural hunger cues. This scarcity had a powerful metabolic effect. Without frequent sugar intake, insulin spikes were small and infrequent. The pancreas was not forced to pump insulin all day long. Blood sugar rose slowly with meals and returned to baseline naturally. Over a lifetime, this meant the insulin system stayed strong rather than becoming exhausted. Diabetes, in this context, had little chance to develop. Just as important is what didn't exist. Refined carbohydrates engineered for rapid absorption. Medieval grains were coarse and fibrous. Fruits were smaller and far less sweet than modern varieties. There were no fruit juices, which concentrate sugar and remove fiber. Eating an apple today is very different from eating a medieval apple, which was tart, firm, and far lower in sugar. Even when peasants consumed something sweet, it arrived packaged with fiber, water, and chewing effort natural brakes on glucose absorption. Contrast this with the modern environment, where sugar is designed to bypass the body's defenses. Liquid sugars hit the bloodstream almost instantly. Ultra-processed foods combine sugar with refined starch and fat, creating a perfect storm for insulin overload. The body reacts as it was designed to, but it is forced to do so repeatedly, day after day. Over time, the system breaks down. Medieval peasants were also protected from psychological dependence on sweetness. When sugar is rare, it does not become emotionally charged. There is no comfort eating, no reward system built around sweet treats, no childhood conditioning that associated happiness with sugar. Today, sugar is often tied to celebration, stress relief, and pleasure. This emotional layer drives overconsumption far beyond physical need. Medieval peasants ate to survive, not to self-soothe. Another overlooked factor is gut health. A low-sugar diet supported a healthier gut microbiome. Harmful bacteria that thrive on sugar were kept in check, while beneficial microbes flourished on fiber-rich foods. Modern research increasingly links gut imbalance to insulin resistance and metabolic disease. Medieval diets, unintentionally, favored microbial diversity that protected metabolic function. Even teeth tell part of the story. Archaeological evidence shows that medieval peasants had far fewer cavities than modern populations until sugar became more widely available. Tooth decay is one of the earliest warning signs of excessive sugar intake. The same forces that rot teeth also damage metabolic health. The absence of cavities reflects the absence of constant sugar exposure. When sugar finally became cheap and abundant in the modern era, diabetes rates exploded. This was not a slow change, it happened within generations. Human biology did not evolve that fast. Medieval peasants weren't healthier because they were smarter or more disciplined. They were healthier because the most dangerous metabolic substance in the modern diet had not yet become cheap, hidden, and unavoidable. In a world where sugar was a luxury, the body remained balanced. In a world where sugar is everywhere, imbalance has become normal. Medieval peasants did not plan their meals around schedules, diet rules, or health trends. They ate when food was available and when labor allowed it. This simple reality created eating patterns that modern science now recognizes as deeply protective against diabetes. Without knowing it, Peasants followed strict eating windows that gave their bodies long breaks from insulin production, something modern lifestyles rarely allow. Breakfast, as we know it today, barely existed. Many peasants began their workday at dawn without eating at all. Fields had to be tended, animals fed, and tasks started early to make use of daylight. The first meal often came late in the morning or even closer to midday. By that time, the body had already spent hours using stored energy. Insulin levels were low, fat was being burned, and muscles were primed to absorb nutrients efficiently once food arrived. Meals themselves were simple and limited. A typical day might include one substantial meal and one smaller one, not 3 large meals plus snacks. There were no cupboards full of food to graze from, no packaged snacks to eat absentmindedly. Once a meal was finished, eating was over until the next planned preparation. This natural spacing between meals prevented insulin from staying elevated throughout the day. The absence of constant snacking was especially important. Every time food is consumed, insulin is released. In modern life, insulin is triggered from morning until night because eating never truly stops. Medieval peasants gave their pancreas long periods of rest. These insulin-free windows allowed cells to reset their sensitivity, preventing the gradual resistance that leads to prediabetes. Nighttime eating was almost non-existent. When the sun went down, work stopped, and food preparation became difficult. Without artificial lighting or refrigeration, there was little reason or ability to eat late. Dinner was eaten early, and the body entered a long overnight fast. This extended fasting period improved blood sugar control and allowed metabolic repair processes to occur. Today, late-night eating under artificial light is common and metabolically disastrous. Seasonal scarcity amplified these effects. During winter or poor harvest years, food was rationed. People ate less not by choice, but by necessity. These periods of reduced intake forced the body to rely on stored energy and improved metabolic flexibility. Rather than harming health, these cycles strengthened it. Modern abundance has erased these natural pauses, leaving metabolism constantly overwhelmed. Importantly, medieval peasants did not experience eating as entertainment. Meals were purposeful and communal. There was no television, no phones, no distractions encouraging overeating. Food was consumed slowly, often after long labor, allowing the body's satiety signals to function properly. When the body said it had enough, eating stopped. Modern science now praises intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating, and metabolic rest as advanced health strategies. Medieval peasants practiced all of these accidentally. Their eating windows were narrow, their fasting periods long, and their meal frequency low. The pancreas was not under constant pressure. Blood sugar rose and fell naturally, not artificially sustained at high levels. Another subtle factor was predictability. The body thrives on rhythm. Peasants ate at roughly the same times each day, guided by daylight and labor. This consistency strengthens circadian alignment, which plays a major role in insulin sensitivity. Today, as irregular eating late dinners, midnight snacks, skipped meals followed by binging confuses the metabolic clock and contributes to disease. Even hunger itself played a protective role. Peasants were familiar with hunger, but it was not feared. Mild hunger between meals was normal, not something to be immediately fixed with a snack. This allowed insulin levels to fall fully and taught the body to access stored energy efficiently. Modern society treats hunger as an emergency, triggering constant eating that keeps insulin permanently elevated. In a world without all-day access to food, the body had time to recover between meals. Medieval peasants did not avoid diabetes through restriction or discipline. They avoided it because eating had boundaries. Those boundaries gave their metabolism the rest it needed to stay healthy for a lifetime. The most uncomfortable truth about diabetes is that it is not a failure of willpower or knowledge. It is the result of an ancient body placed into a modern environment it was never designed to survive. Medieval peasants lived in conditions that matched human biology almost perfectly. Modern Americans live in conditions that quietly attack it every day. The body itself has not changed, but the world around it has. And the mismatch is devastating. Human metabolism evolved in a world of scarcity, movement, darkness at night, and unpredictability. Energy had to be earned through effort. Food arrived in whole forms and disappeared when seasons changed. Rest followed exhaustion, and hunger was normal. The pancreas, insulin system, and fat storage mechanisms were designed to handle this rhythm. When medieval peasants lived this way, their biology worked as intended. Modern life breaks every one of these assumptions. Food is abundant, cheap, and engineered for constant consumption. Movement is optional. Artificial light extends the day indefinitely. Stress is psychological and chronic rather than physical and temporary. The body responds to this environment exactly as evolution predicts, by storing energy, resisting insulin, and eventually breaking down. Cars replaced walking. Machines replaced labor. Screens replaced sleep. Meals became constant. Snacks filled every gap. The metabolic system was never given a chance to rest. Insulin, meant to be released in controlled bursts, became a hormone permanently turned on. Over time, cells stopped listening. Blood sugar rose. Prediabetes became common, then normal. What makes this trap especially cruel is that it feels comfortable. Modern life removes physical hardship but replaces it with metabolic damage. The absence of movement feels like rest, but the body interprets it as danger. The constant availability of food feels like security, but the body responds by storing fat and raising blood sugar. Artificial light feels productive, but it disrupts hormonal rhythms that protect insulin sensitivity. Medieval peasants suffered from many hardships, but metabolic disease was not one of them. They died from infections, injuries, and famine, not from slow, invisible diseases that took decades to develop. Diabetes requires long-term metabolic overload. The medieval environment simply did not provide the conditions necessary for that overload to exist. Modern medicine has become incredibly advanced, yet it mostly treats the symptoms of this mismatch rather than its cause. Blood sugar monitors, medications, and insulin injections manage the damage but do not remove the environment creating it. Medieval peasants didn't need medicine for diabetes because their world prevented the disease from forming in the first place. The tragedy is that modern humans often blame themselves. They count calories, track steps, download apps, and feel guilt when they fail. Medieval peasants didn't need discipline because their environment enforced healthy behavior automatically. Today, health requires constant resistance against surroundings designed to undermine it. This is not a fair fight. Understanding this mismatch shifts the question from what's wrong with people to what's wrong with the environment. When 1/3 of a population becomes pre-diabetic, the problem is systemic, not individual. No species develops mass disease overnight without a dramatic change in habitat. The solution is not to return to medieval hardship but to learn from it. Reintroducing boundaries around eating, restoring daily movement, respecting natural sleep cycles, and removing constant sugar exposure are not radical ideas, they are ancient ones. The closer modern life moves toward the conditions the human body evolved for, the more metabolic health improves. Medieval peasants did not live longer lives, but within their shortened lifespans, their metabolism remained strong. Modern Americans live longer but often spend decades managing preventable disease. Comfort has extended life, but it has also compromised its quality. Diabetes is not inevitable. It is the predictable outcome of a modern world layered onto ancient biology. Medieval peasants were protected not by knowledge or technology, but by alignment. Until modern life regains some of that alignment, prediabetes will remain the silent price of comfort. For more stories that reveal how the past explains the problems of the modern world, subscribe now. The next story may surprise you.